Ronald Takaki's Debating Diversity was a really interesting book. I highly recommend reading it just because of how applicable it is and will continue to be. He bases this anthology on the idea of the melting pot, which we will talk about later, and really provokes intense thoughts on I don't see color, I don't see gender, taking essays from people in positions of influence, comparing them to his real-life experiences. His first section talks about the difference between race and ethnicity and how that affects our social standing, no matter how much we argue against that. He discusses affirmative action and how there doesn't seem to be a happy medium between whites and people of color.
Using Powtoon.
He begins comparing Harvard professor Nathan Glazer's essay and his own regarding the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Glazer says the government should just tell people, don't be racist, and that an American should be defined as a person of any skin color who follows the rules and customs set in place by the government and the majority. Takaki combats that with facts, proving Glazer's idea is improbable and saying you must treat different people differently in order to treat them equally. He continues discussing the role of education in our view of race and society, challenging the current curriculum centered around manifest destiny and how America has always been destined to be a white country. Frederick Jackson Turner justifies the annexation of America from the natives because there weren't very many and no one was stopping us, therefore it was our right to take this land, exploit the natural resources, and civilize the savages. Takaki asks how the natives, a people of peace and community, became known as savages by the people who tortured, raped, killed, scalped, and civilized them, the first peoples. Samuel P. Huntington develops a sort of algorithm for war. War is caused by the difference of cultures, a clash of civilizations. He divides the world into 7 cultural parts, completely ignoring indigenous, African, and Buddhist cultures because they are illegitimate. He explains that we can achieve a universal Western culture through a strong Western military presence. Elizabeth Martinez says that people wouldn't think in the Western supremacist mindset Huntington displays if we taught our children in schools how America really became a country. Talk about the natives and slaves like they're real people, and explain the cultural genocide the Europeans committed. Takaki examines the relationship between our hierarchy of race and our need for survival. Why did we need to bring in African slaves when white indentured servants could have done the same work? We see this concept play out today while immigrants are coming here to work on the farms and unemployed whites are collecting money from the government without wanting to do the work that needs to be done. He continues explaining the only reason white workers were replaced with colored slaves is because landowners and corporations feared whites could become too strong if they wanted to rebel. More proof that people of color are thought of as inferior. W.E.B. Du Bois and Harvard Sitkoff talk about the situation of the Negro. America claims to be the land of opportunity, but that's only if you're a free white person. People of color started to become more assertive in proclaiming their rights as human beings, as brought Asa Philip Randolph up to be an extremely influential union organizer and movement leader, inspiring laborers to fight the system and make something of themselves. The next two essays discuss the underappreciated exploitation of Hispanic and Asian workers. Same as today, the immigrants came to work on the farms and in factories. When the whites came in and took control of the businesses, the segregation and racism caused riots to break out. Funny how the whites continue to claim immigrants are stealing our jobs when the white union came in and stole their work. Part 4 discusses gender, which isn't typically at the forefront of diversity classes. Women have always had to fight against the man for basic human rights, same as people of color have had to do, even though there was still racial segregation in women's suffrage. Susan Glenn's essay was really interesting, seeing variations of this in my own family. A Jewish girl was more marketable than her brother because he had to be successful and get an education or apprenticeship. Jewish women don't work as not to compete with their husbands, so an unmarried Jewish girl had to work either alongside or instead of her father in a sweatshop to provide for the men in her family so that they could be successful. King explains the struggle of double discrimination, women of color. Other cultures often expect the submission of women and they aren't taken seriously in the working world. Often for white women, but even more so for Hispanic, Black, and Asian women. This is why women of color are typically seen working as maids in hotels or other forms of domestic labor, while white women work clerical jobs as secretaries or receptionists. Even the feminist movement today seems exclusive to white women. They don't continue to fight for their fellow women of color. A continuation of King's essay, Dill describes feminism as an ever-growing movement that will hopefully become an all-inclusive sisterhood. Females are known for being more judgmental of their own gender, tearing each other down because of race and class. We've come away from this era of personal attacks and begun to bring ourselves together as a valid movement. Sexual orientation has throughout history been a quality of diversity and cause of discrimination. Because gender roles have been such a strong theme of American and every other culture, heterosexual cisgender people are accepted while others are not. Alice Hom interviewed Asian families who had children come out. Their parents said it took a very long time to get past thinking their gay kids weren't the same, when in fact they were. The book continues with race relations. This picture was shown to a group of kids who were asked if these two looked like friends. The children answered yes, Bobby was helping Scott pick up his books. The same picture was shown to adults who said no, Bobby pushed Scott down. Going back to the chapters on education, racism isn't born with, it's taught. Because of the stereotypes given to people of color like Bobby, the policies in place have set them up for failure. This Martin Luther King Jr. quote explains how the system works. The slaves are free, but they can't exercise their freedom. Racial segregation is not just about race, it has caused class segregation. Black communities have statistically shown a lack of necessary aid and structure because of environmental discrimination. For example, Flint, Michigan hasn't had clean water since April 2014, over 3 years ago. Yet Hollywood has made a movie about it. Think about what that movie budget could have done for Flint instead of the pockets of Hollywood. The need for survival and lack of means results in the rise of crime, causing single-mother homes. Sakaki gives his solution for a more effective one-woman home: set and follow rules. Another tool for controlling minorities was labor. This image shows the double standard in how the people in charge see minorities, specifically Hispanics. Sakaki dissects the role of immigration in American culture. Contrary to the instinct, these immigrants are taking our jobs, the only real competition is in higher-paying fields like medicine or manual labor, not the typical 9-to-5 most Americans have. Immigrant labor has also added billions, $8 billion in Washington state alone, to the national economy. Sakaki next elaborates on the real issues of our economy. Deindustrialization has taken work out of the states and into other countries. Deunionization has taken away workers' rights, sufficient pay, and ultimately a decrease in workers, which means more people collecting government aid. The ultimate reason for the shortcomings of our economy is the unresponsiveness to global competition and national issues from the people with all the money. Crime is and always has been a huge part of American culture. Sakaki's main concerns are people taking advantage of what is legal and using it to the point of illegality. Weapons specifically, as we see in instances like Las Vegas and Sutherland Springs, Texas. He explains the main roots of crime are early and environmental experiences that have shaped people's outlook on life. The way to control this is to teach coping mechanisms and self-control. If everyone would understand the value of life and how impactful one's actions can be, there would be no more crime. Here is the melting pot we mentioned in the beginning. America is the melting pot where all who come here have their own unique cultures, mixing all of us together to become not just a group of different people, but Americans in America.